The silence around her was deafening, but not in the way most people understood silence. 8-year-old Emma Richardson sat alone at the pristine white table in the corner of the elementary school cafeteria, her small fingers tracing invisible patterns on the marble surface while chaos erupted around her. Children laughed, shouted, and chased each other between tables, but none of them looked her way. Not once. It wasn't cruelty, exactly, it was something worse. It was indifference. The kind that makes a child invisible in a room full of people. Her father, tech billionaire Marcus Richardson, could buy her anything in the world except the one thing she desperately needed, a friend who would see her for who she was, not what she couldn't hear. Across the cafeteria, Daniel Morrison balanced a tray of chicken nuggets while his 6-year-old son, Tyler, tugged insistently at his worn jacket. Daniel wasn't supposed to be there. Single dads with construction jobs and perpetually empty bank accounts didn't usually volunteer for school lunch duty, but Tyler's teacher had mentioned they needed help, and Daniel had learned long ago that showing up mattered more than having much to offer. His calloused hands and paint-stained jeans stood in stark contrast to the designer handbags and luxury watches worn by the other parent volunteers, but he'd stopped caring about that years ago. That's when he noticed her. The little girl with golden curls and a pink dress that probably cost more than his monthly rent, sitting completely alone. What struck him wasn't just her isolation, it was the way she held herself, shoulders slightly hunched, as if trying to take up less space in the world. He'd seen that posture before, in the mirror, during the darkest days after his wife left. The look of someone who'd learned not to expect much from people. Daniel watched as a group of children rushed past Emma's table, so close they nearly knocked over her untouched juice box. She didn't flinch, didn't call out, she simply pulled her arms closer to her body and continued staring at the table. Something in his chest tightened. "Tyler," he said softly to his son, "do you know that girl?" Tyler glanced over and shrugged. "That's Emma. She can't hear. Nobody really talks to her." The casualness of that statement, the acceptance of a child's loneliness is just another fact of life, hit Daniel like a punch. He'd spent the last 3 years teaching Tyler that kindness wasn't optional, that people mattered regardless of their circumstances. And here was a child who desperately needed someone to practice what he'd been preaching. Daniel took a breath and walked toward Emma's table. He didn't have a plan, exactly, but his mother had been a special education teacher before she passed, and she'd taught him basic sign language during her battle with cancer. "You never know when it might matter," she'd told him. He hadn't used it in years, but as he approached the lonely little girl, his mother's words echoed in his mind. Emma didn't notice him at first. Daniel gently tapped the table in her line of sight, and she looked up, her blue eyes widening with surprise and a flicker of something that might have been hope. Daniel smiled and slowly signed, "Hello. My name is Daniel. What's yours?" The transformation was instantaneous. Emma's entire face lit up as if someone had switched on a light inside her. Her hands flew up in response, signing so quickly that Daniel had to ask her to slow down. She giggled, a sound so pure and unexpected that several nearby parents turned to look, and repeated her name more slowly. "It's nice to meet you, Emma," he signed. "Would you like some company?" She nodded so enthusiastically that her curls bounced, and within seconds, she was telling him about her day, her favorite color purple, her pet rabbit Mr. Whiskers, and how she'd learned to read 3-chapter books that week. Her hands moved with elegant precision, and Daniel found himself genuinely captivated by this brilliant, overlooked child. Tyler wandered over, curious about what had made the quiet girl so animated. "Dad, what are you doing?" "Making a new friend," Daniel said aloud while simultaneously signing for Emma. "Want to learn how to say hello to Emma properly." For the next 20 minutes, the corner table transformed from an island of isolation into the cafeteria's most engaging spot. Daniel taught Tyler basic signs, and Emma patiently corrected their fumbling attempts with encouraging smiles. Other children began to notice, drawn by the laughter and the strange, beautiful language being spoken with hands instead of voices. What Daniel didn't know was that Marcus Richardson was watching from the cafeteria entrance. The billionaire had arrived early to pick up his daughter, something he'd been doing more frequently since realizing how isolated she'd become. He stood frozen, watching a man in construction clothes do what Marcus's money, influence, and increasingly desperate attempts had failed to accomplish, make his daughter feel seen. Marcus's throat tightened as he watched Emma's animated conversation, her joy so evident it radiated across the room. He'd hired specialists, enrolled her in exclusive programs, even considered switching schools. But he'd missed the simplest solution: genuine human connection, offered freely by someone who had nothing to gain. When lunch period ended, Marcus approached the table. Daniel stood quickly, suddenly aware of who Emma's father must be. He'd seen Marcus Richardson's face on enough business magazines in the grocery store checkout line. The billionaire extended his hand, and Daniel shook it, noting the slight tremor in the other man's grip. "I'm Marcus Richardson," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Emma's father. I need to thank you." "No thanks needed," Daniel replied. "Emma's a wonderful kid. She just needed someone to listen, or I guess, to watch." He smiled at his own joke. Marcus glanced at his daughter, who was showing Tyler a drawing from her backpack, both children's faces bright with the unself-conscious joy of new friendship. "She hasn't smiled like that in months," Marcus admitted. "The other parents, they see the money, the headlines, the security detail. They don't see her. They certainly don't take the time to learn how to communicate with her." "Their loss," Daniel said simply. "She's pretty great." That moment became the beginning of an unlikely friendship. Marcus, humbled by a construction worker's simple act of kindness, began volunteering for lunch duty himself, learning sign language alongside the growing group of children who wanted to talk to Emma. Daniel, who'd never had much, taught the billionaire that the most valuable things can't be purchased, they're given freely or not at all. 6 months later, Marcus funded a district-wide program to teach basic sign language to all students and staff, but he credited Daniel as the true architect of change. "You didn't see a billionaire's daughter," Marcus said at the program's launch. "You saw a lonely child who needed a friend. That's a vision money can't buy." Daniel never sought recognition or reward. He'd simply done what his mother taught him: show up, pay attention, and treat every person like they matter. Because they do. And sometimes, the smallest gesture, a smile, a greeting signed with imperfect hands, a moment of genuine attention, can change everything. Emma Richardson never sat alone at lunch again. And Daniel Morrison learned that being rich had nothing to do with your bank account and everything to do with the wealth you create in other people's lives.